This morning, the passage of Scripture we'll be turning to is Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15. In just a moment, I'll pick up with verse 11. Luke chapter 15. Do you have a memory from childhood where you were a small child and you were in a crowded location, perhaps a department store, a grocery store, a high school football game, the farm show, just where there's a big crowd of people, and all of a sudden the parent who's taking care of you, or the older sibling who is watching out for you, or the aunt or uncle or grandparent who you are with are nowhere to be seen. All you see is a sea of people who don't belong to you. Do you have a memory of being lost like that as a child? If you do, you probably remember it quite well, and it's a visceral memory. I was actually talking to someone after the first service, after I gave this sermon, and they told me that they remembered when they were 3 years old and were in a department store holding on to their mother's skirt until they realized they were holding on to the wrong skirt. 3 years old, and all these years later, they still remember. Well, if you've had an experience like that, you no doubt still remember it, and you can remember the fear that grips you when you're lost. But ultimately, and I'm going to assume if this happened to you, at some point somebody found you, that fear then turns to relief. And that relief is so great when we've been found that relief itself becomes, joy, because we are so relieved at being found. So if you have a memory of being a child and getting lost, that's one thing. But what if you have a memory of losing a child? What if you're an adult, an older sibling, an aunt or uncle, a grandparent, and you were entrusted with taking care of a young child at a public place, grocery store, high school football game, some other crowded event, holiday shopping, whatever it might be. And all of a sudden you turned around and they weren't there. Have you lived through that? Oh my goodness. I want to talk about fear when you've lost a child. Oh, there's really nothing like that feeling. And then, of course, there's the great relief when you see the police officer approaching you, holding your little child by hand as they come up to you. And that relief is so great that you're overjoyed. Your relief becomes joy. So you go from fear to joy quicker than a muscle car can go from 0 to 60. It happens. And we know this experience, don't we? We know the great fear of being lost. And we know the great joy of being found. With that in mind, Luke chapter 15, verse 11. And Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. And when he was longing to be fed with the pods the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe, put it on him, and a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet, and bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Now, hopefully you have heard this story before. This, at one point that I can remember, was considered the greatest short story ever written down. It's only in Luke's gospel that we have the story of the prodigal son. And it has been, general consensus, considered the greatest short story ever written down. Which means, of course, it was the greatest short story ever told. This is an incredible story of forgiveness, which we're going to take a closer look at here in just a moment. But first, let's get our bearings, shall we? We've been doing a number of different things the last few weeks. We are now in the month of April. This month also includes a little thing we call Easter, right? That's 2 weeks from today, Resurrection Sunday. And of course, every Sunday is Resurrection Sunday. But on Easter, we celebrate Jesus' resurrection in a special way. And so what we plan to do this month is to take a look at a number of things leading up to and including Easter that come out of Luke's gospel. So we're going to start today with this, the story of the prodigal son. Here in this story, Jesus is telling us why it is that he came to earth, his point and purpose in coming here. But we never like to just dive in and take a look at a particular set of passages without seeing those verses, that passage, in context. Why is Jesus telling this story? Who is he telling it to? And does that make any difference to us hearing it all these years later? Well, the short answer to that last question is yes, it absolutely does. So let's take a look at why Jesus told this story, who he was telling it to, and then we'll take a closer look at the story itself. So to do that, I want to back up, go back past verse 11 here of chapter 15 and go up to the very first verse of chapter 15. This will tell us who Jesus is speaking to. Now, the tax collectors and the sinners were all drawing near to hear him. And the Pharisees and scribes grumbled, saying, This man receives sinners and eats with them. So what was happening is this. Jesus was in his earthly ministry. He was teaching. He was preaching. He was healing people. Sinners were coming to him, and he was forgiving sinners of their sins. This was all wonderful. We had people that their lives were just ensnared with sin, and they're coming to him and being forgiven. The categories mentioned here are tax collectors and sinners. The tax collectors were seen as being, betraying their country because they worked for the Romans, and the way they did it was more like extortion than anything else. So they were seen as being wicked. And sinners here would have included prostitutes and other individuals like that. So these are people that really were, sinners. They really were bad folks. They're coming to Jesus. They are being forgiven. They are having the weight of that guilt lifted off their shoulders. This is all wonderful, right? Well, not everybody loves it. Who doesn't love it? Well, we're told here, the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled about this, saying, This man receives sinners and eats with them. Who are the Pharisees? The Pharisees were the most religious people in the New Testament. They desired to obey God's law so greatly that they built up a number of other laws that they invented in order to prevent themselves and anybody else from even approaching God's law. An example I've liked to use in the past regarding this is as such. Let's say the speed limit was 55 miles an hour. The Pharisees would come along and say, no one can drive more than 35 miles an hour, because if no one drives more than 35 miles an hour, no one will be in danger of breaking the law by driving 55 miles an hour. There's a certain logic to that. But what they ended up doing was creating more laws that God did not create, and they imposed them on the rest of society. They themselves were like a professional class of law keepers, but everybody else had jobs and families and that sort of thing, so it was quite a burden on everybody else. But that's who these people were. They took their religion very, very seriously. Now, the other group mentioned here are the scribes. Scribes would be the experts in the law coming from the religious documents. The Old Testament is what we call it today. So they would be, in a sense, something akin to lawyers today. Now, someone who's a really good lawyer can do good by practicing their skills, or they could also misuse their skills to take advantage of people. The scribes, in large part, were using their abilities to take advantage of people that didn't understand the law as well as themselves. So these are the groups that are grumbling that God is allowing lawbreakers, or Jesus rather is allowing lawbreakers to come to him and be forgiven. It's not right. It outrages their sense of justice. Jesus knows this, and he responds to them. And he doesn't respond to them by calling them out. He tells them a series of stories, a triad of stories. 3 stories here. The last of which is the story of the prodigal son. But that's the last of the 3. There are 2 that come before that. Let's take a look at the first one. It's in verse 3. So Jesus told them this parable. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Okay, so Jesus responds to them with a story. He says, if you have 100 sheep and one of the sheep goes missing, are you just going to write it off? No. Here's what you or any sheep shepherd would do. You would make sure the 99 are in a safe place, and then you would go and seek out that one lost sheep. And when you find that sheep, what do? You put that sheep on your shoulders. And then we have this beautiful image of a powerful shepherd walking home with this exhausted sheep, exhausted lamb on his shoulders. A lamb that was lost but is now found. A lamb that was in danger but is now safe. A lamb that is exhausted but is now being taken care of. And the shepherd brings the lamb home, and what does that shepherd do? Calls friends and family, and they rejoice. All throughout the Old Testament, God is referred to as a shepherd. There's numerous instances of this. Perhaps the most famous, and the one I'll point out to you now, is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. David sees that God takes care of him as David takes care of sheep as a shepherd. So God presents himself in many ways as a shepherd. So the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious authorities who are hearing Jesus tell this story, are predisposed to recognize that when Jesus says shepherd, he is talking about a stand-in for God. So Jesus is telling them, here's who God is, and here's what God does. God is the God who searches out lost sheep. He's not really talking about sheep, is he? He's talking about lost souls. If there is a soul that is lost, God doesn't ignore that soul. God goes and seeks that soul out, rescues that soul, brings that soul back. And when that soul has been rescued, what does that lead to? Rejoicing. Jesus mentions joy or rejoicing 3 times in this little story. of the lost sheep. Let me point them out to you. Verse 5, and when he has found the sheep, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. That's example 1. Verse 6, and when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, rejoice with me. Example number 2. Go to verse 7. Just so I tell you, there will be more joy. So we have rejoicing, rejoicing, and joy. Same word, same idea. There will be more joy in heaven when the lost sheep is found. So, do you think the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious authorities here, are they able to track with what Jesus is saying? Do they get the point? Lost souls are being found. Heaven is rejoicing. Perhaps you should join the party as well. That's the point of the story. Okay. He now dives into a second story. Listen to the second story. Verse 8. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp and sweep the house and seek diligently until she finds it? And when she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost. Just so I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Now we hear this second story, and it sounds kind of similar to the first story, doesn't it? We have something that is lost. That lost thing is sought after. It is found. And then what? There's a lot of rejoicing after the finding of the lost thing. It's a parallel story, isn't it? It's a parallel story. So let's take a look at the particulars of this particular story. There is a woman. She has 10 coins. She loses one. It apparently is nighttime because she lights a lamp and she sweeps out the house looking for this lost coin. She's very, very eager to find it. Now, before we get to the conclusion that she does find it, let's take a look a little closer at her in this example. So it's a woman. She is alone in the house. Okay? There is no mention of a husband. There's no mention of children here. When she finally finds the coin, who does she invite to celebrate with her? Not family. There's no mention of a husband, no mention of children. She calls her friends and her neighbors. So we gather from this that she's unmarried, doesn't have children. And most likely in that society, she's a widow. Because most young women would have been married. It's just a cultural expectation. So she's probably a widow. In that society, widows really did not have a means of making money for themselves. So it was a very, very difficult situation for a widow, particularly if she didn't have children to take care of her. That appears to be the case here. It is a woman who has no one to help her out. But what does she have? She has savings. She has these 10 silver coins. And one gets the sense from the way Jesus tells this story that it is all she possesses. And one night, she loses one of those 10 coins. It's almost like you're watching the stock market and it goes down 10% in a week. Kind of hard to imagine, right? Yeah. But it's all that she has to live on. So it's even worse than that. She needs to find this coin. She needs this coin. And so the lamp goes on. She sweeps out the house. Can't you kind of feel her anxiety? I've got to find this. I've got to find this. Oh God, help me find this. You know, it's enough to make even us non-Catholics cry out to St. Christopher, right? To find the coin. Is that the right saint? Yeah, I thought it was. So she's desperate here. Okay, now in the first story, the shepherd is clearly a stand-in for God. Is the woman a stand-in for God too? Are we seeing some kind of gender blending here from Jesus? No, I don't think so. I don't know if you've heard the news, but there's a new series of the Chronicle of Narnia movies that's coming out, and it's made news this past week because the director of the movies wants to cast Chronicles of Narnia. If you're not familiar, it's like an allegory, and there is a lion that stands in for Jesus in the allegory from this great Christian author C.S. Lewis. The producers of this new movie want to cast a woman as Jesus, the Jesus stand-in here, for their own purposes, no doubt. Jesus is not doing that here. And the first century hearers of this story would not have thought as a woman being a stand-in for God in the way that a shepherd would be, because God never presents himself as that way. He's always presenting himself as the masculine. That's his choice, not ours. That is the way God presents himself. But I tell you what would have happened when people heard this story, when Jesus is using a woman as the center of the story here. All of the women who were around that would have been listening to Jesus tell this story would have been given one more bit of evidence that Jesus gets them, understands their difficulties in life, and is inviting them into the kingdom as well. So very interesting the way he does that. But we have this woman, we have the lost coin. She sweeps for the coin, she finds the coin, and then what happens? There's rejoicing. And she invites her friends and relatives to come and rejoice with her. And Jesus concludes this story the same way he concluded the story of the lost sheep. Verse 10, just so I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Jesus in both of these stories says that the individual who has joy wants to share that with friends and neighbors, not relatives, friends and neighbors. Two categories, and I think the two categories Jesus wants us to see as two realities to the rejoicing when a lost soul is found. There is rejoicing here on earth, and there is equal rejoicing in heaven when a lost soul is found. And so Jesus is telling this to the religious authorities. God seeks out lost souls. When they are found, there is rejoicing in heaven. Why don't you join the party? Why don't you join the party? Now, in ancient days, rhetoric and the study of rhetoric, the ability to give speeches, was very important. People who had the means would teach their sons especially in the rules of rhetoric. It still can be studied today, though it's not often studied as much as it has been in the past. But one of the rules of rhetoric is that if you want to emphasize a point, repeat it 3 times. There's something about saying something 3 times that really drives the point home. And so Jesus is driving this point home to the first hearers, the religious authorities, and everybody else who's going to hear this as well, including us today, by giving us 3 stories that work in parallel. Now, we've already seen the first 2, and we've seen the pattern here. Something's lost, it is sought out, it's found, there's rejoicing. So we get it. But those 2 stories are somewhat abstract, are they not? In the story of the woman, she loses a coin. Okay, a coin is an abstract symbol for a lost soul. The other story, a lost sheep, that's a living creature, but not a human, certainly. Once again, abstract. This third story is not. This third story has people in it. People that we can recognize. People like us. Now, when Jesus tells a story, he's always sort of like a parable. He's always sort of driving towards this aha moment. There's going to be a couple of them in the story of the prodigal son. But the biggest one really has to do not with the action of the prodigal, but with the action of the father. So keep that in mind as we take a closer look now at the story of the prodigal son. Okay, verse 11. And Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Okay, let's pause here. So we have 2 sons. The younger says to the father, give me my share. Give me my inheritance. Okay, how would that have worked in the ancient world? So in the ancient world, a very traditional society, the law dictated, and this is the custom as well, so nobody had any problem with this, that the eldest son was going to receive 2/3 of the inheritance when the father died. This was done so that the family estate would and farm or whatever it was would remain in the hands of the family and move on down through the generations. So there was a point and purpose behind this. 2/3 went to the eldest son, which meant that if there's a younger son here, he's going to get 1/3. He's going to get 1/3. And that's what this son is asking for. He's asking for his 1/3. Now, the property was divvied up not when the youngest son demands the property being divvied up, but on the death of the father. So it is very strange and very rude and very disrespectful for the younger son to come to the father and ask for his inheritance while the father is still alive. What the younger son is basically saying to the father, and all the hearers of this story when Jesus first gave it would have recognized this, what the younger son is asking of the father is for the father to drop dead. He's asking for the father to get lost. I don't want to deal with you anymore. I want my inheritance, and I want to go my own way. So, very brazen, very disrespectful. It's disrespectful in 2025. It's very disrespectful back in that traditional society. It's also sinful. If you go back and take a look at the law that God gave to the people through Moses, disrespecting your parents is a sin that is punishable by death. That probably didn't happen all that often, but it's a very serious sin. So this son is doing all of that. But the surprising part of this, the surprising event that happens in this first few verses is not a son being disrespectful. Everyone who's hearing this story would have been able to picture people they knew that were disrespectful. Maybe not to this extreme, but they would have known disrespectful people. What would have surprised everyone is that the father did it. The father divvied up his property and gave 1/3 to his son. Now, the father recognizes that his son is probably going to mishandle this third, but he gives it to him anyway. Now, we were joking a little bit earlier about the market going down 10% or the woman losing 10% of what she owned. Here, when the father gives 1/3 to his son, he is reducing his net worth by 1/3. That's 33%, right? Imagine if the market went down 33% and you're living off your retirement savings. That's what the father is dealing with here. He no longer has that 1/3 on which he can live, but he does it anyway. What does the son do? Verse 13, not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. I mean, we could all see this coming, right? The father, no doubt, saw this coming as well. And here's the deepest blow. So the son has been disrespectful to his father, basically saying, drop dead, give me my money now. The father has forked over 1/3 of his estate that he no doubt was counting on to the son. But then when the son leaves and goes to a foreign land, here's what's happening. The son at this point is rejecting everything that the father has taught him. Everything that the father holds dear. Everything that the father has built his life upon is now being rejected by the son. And that cuts deeper than anything else. The money's just money. The property, at the end of the day, is just property. But this is the rejection of everything that the father would hold dear. The son could not wound the father more than he has. And so he goes off to a foreign land, blows through the money. Verse 14. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out Actually, the Greek here isn't hired himself out. Joined himself to is a more literal translation of what's being said here. So he joined himself to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. So we see the son here not just rejecting everything his father holds dear, but he now has sort of bonded himself to this foreign people, this foreign culture. And what is he doing? He is taking care of pigs. For the Jewish culture, they didn't have anything to do with pigs. Pigs were an unclean animal. The people hearing this story, that Jesus is directing the story to, those who were very concerned about keeping God's law, they wouldn't even say the word pig, let alone eat a pig or prepare a pig. But here, that's what the son is driven to. He's not even a member of the nation anymore. He is so far gone. He's one of them. One of those wicked people over there somewhere, seated in that section of the church. No, I'm just kidding. I realize I'm pointing that direction. I don't want to put all that on you. But over there somewhere, right? So it's a terrible situation, but it's just what he deserves, right? What an idiot. What a fool. Verse 17. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.'" This young man has one of those aha moments. He comes to himself. He comes to his senses. He has a come to Jesus moment when he has to recognize that the one person he can count on is not himself. He has proven that he cannot count on himself. The mess that he is in is a mess that he is the author of. Now, probably before this, he would have blamed everybody else for the situation he's in. He would have blamed the economy. He would have blamed the weather. He probably would have blamed his father for giving him the money to begin with. But he comes to his senses and recognizes that the blame lies right here. And the other thing he realizes is that the one person he can depend on is his father. Can't depend on himself, can't depend on all the friends he had when he had money because they're all gone. The only person he knows that he can depend on is the one he rejected so completely. But what can he do? All I can do is go and beg. I know I don't deserve to be his son anymore. Maybe I can just go to work for him as a servant. I'd be content with that because that's even more than I deserve. And so he comes up with this plan. And the words he gives are repeated when he shows up in front of the Father here in just a couple verses. And the reason I point that out is because I imagine him on the whole long walk home, and he has nothing, so it would have been a walk. The whole long walk home, he is rehearsing what he's going to say to his father. He's rehearsing this mea culpa. Imagine if you blew it at work, and it's the weekend, and you know Monday morning you got a meeting with your boss. You're rehearsing your speech, aren't you? You're rehearsing that, and you want to get the wordage just right. You want to get the tone just right. He's rehearsing all the way home. Verse 20, and he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him. Once again, a shocking action from the father, which is so shocking, it covers up the shocking actions of the son. The son is disobedient. The son dishonors his father. The son is a fool. But the father, instead of demanding justice, gives mercy. It's amazing. It's impossible. It's incredible. But that's exactly what happens. The father rushes out and embraces and kisses his son. Okay, now's the time for the son to give the speech he's been rehearsing all the way home. And he's ready for the moment. Here it is. Verse 21, and the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. He can't even get the third statement out. What's the third statement he's going to say? Treat me as one of your hired servants. He never gets it out. He never gets it out. He never gets it out because the father interrupts him. Verse 22, but the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fatted calf to kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. So he doesn't even get that out. The father says, get the best robe, perhaps the father's robe, and put it on him. The son has nothing, right? May not even have an outer garment. Get the best robe, my robe perhaps, put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, probably a signet ring, probably a ring that would have been used by the sons to seal legal documents. They would have pressed the signet into the clay, and that would have been like a signature. It's like the dad is saying, give him the family company checkbook. He's entrusting him. He's elevating him to sonship. What he thought he had lost. And he says, get the fatted calf and prepare it. A fatted calf would have fed like 30, 40 people. So what the father is anticipating here is inviting the town to come and celebrate with the father because something that was lost is now found. Okay? That's what's going on here. Jesus tells this story, and it is an incredible story. And as I mentioned before, times have shifted a little bit, but there was a time not so long ago that I can remember when this truly was, and I was an English major, this truly was considered the greatest short story ever given, ever set down as Luke does, ever told as Jesus tells it. We all can identify with someone who's blown it, who deserves justice but gets mercy instead. How wonderful is that? Jesus, in telling this story, is sharing the heart of the Father in heaven. And he's also indicating why he, Jesus, God in the flesh, has come. Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. On the way, he is rescuing lost sheep. He is finding lost coins. He is welcoming back prodigal sons and daughters. And when he gets to Jerusalem, he is going to go to the cross, lay down his life on Good Friday to forgive the prodigal sons and the prodigal daughters. He's going to rise again on the third day, having conquered sin, death, and hell. And now the prodigal daughters and the prodigal sons can come to God through the cross of his son, Jesus. Jesus has come on a rescue mission. He's out looking for the lost sheep, the lost souls. Here we have the gospel. It's right here. It's right here. If you have not responded to the gospel before today, Jesus came and told this story knowing that one day you would hear it. That you, as a prodigal daughter, a prodigal son, could have that aha moment and recognize that the mess you are standing in is of your own making, and the only one in this life who is dependable is God himself. And put your hope and trust in God. Turn to him and repent. That is available to you right now. Jesus has made it so. But this story isn't quite over yet. There is another son in this story. Do you remember? There's two sons. There's the elder son, there's the younger son. It's the younger son who asks for the inheritance, goes off and blows it, and comes back. What of the elder son? Okay? Verse 25. Now, his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." But he was angry and refused to go in. And his father came out and entreated him, begged him, saying, verse 29, but he answered his father, "Look, these many years I have served you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." So do you remember who Jesus told this triad of stories to originally? It was the religious authorities, the Pharisees and the scribes, those who were angered when the sinners were being invited in to know Jesus and being forgiven of their sins. Their sense of justice was being outraged by what Jesus was doing. Just like this eldest son here in the story. This eldest son is angry at what his father is doing because the eldest son has a sense of justice. My brother did wrong. It's not fair that he should be forgiven. I've done right. It's not fair that you shouldn't celebrate me. His sense of justice is outraged. Jesus tells this story to the religious authorities with the understanding that they would recognize that they're the eldest son. They are the ones who are having their sense of justice outraged, and they have a point. The sinners are sinning. But they misread God, and they misread his heart. He is a God of grace and mercy. As this father has shown mercy to the prodigal son, Jesus has come to show God's grace and mercy to all. And so Jesus invites them to join the party, just like the father invites the eldest son. Come, join the party. Come, rejoice with me. What was lost is now found. It is a temptation for religious folk in the first century world and in the 21st century to be like that eldest son and to forget what is most precious in life. Because what is most precious in life? It's not the fatted calf. It's not the 1/3 of the estate. It's God. God is the great prize in this life. God in the flesh, Jesus, is the one that invites us into that relationship. So we can say that Jesus is the prize. If you have Jesus, you have everything. And that's what, in the story, the father is trying to tell to the eldest son. I have always been with you. You have always had me. I'm the dependable one. I'm the one you can rely on. I'm the one that can provide for you. When you're with me, you're safe. With me, you have everything. Don't worry about the fatted calf. Don't worry about the 1/3 of the estate. How often do we worry about those other things and forget that if we have Jesus, we have everything? Okay, so what are our takeaways from this incredible triad of stories, this incredible story, the story of the prodigal son? Well, the first would be the gospel. And as I mentioned before, if you have not responded to the gospel before, the Father is entreating you to do so now. Jesus came to rescue lost souls. It's what he did for me. He can do it for you. Okay, all you need to do is come to yourself. Go to him, recognizing that you need his help, just like the prodigal does in the story. All you need to do is say, Jesus, help me. I need your help. And he will be yours. Okay. Second takeaway is this. The father of the prodigal in the story is clearly a stand-in for God. And how does God react to the prodigal? He waits eagerly by the door of the ranch or the house or whatever, and he sees the prodigal coming home, and he runs out and embraces him. Many of us have people close to us who have rejected what is precious to us, the faith in God and building our lives on the rock of Christ. This can be especially painful when it's our children that have rejected that. God gives them the freedom to make their own choices. We can't make those choices for them when they get older. And sometimes they do walk away. And it hurts. It's like a knife in the heart. When we wait patiently for them, when we pray for them, when we are eager to embrace them if they turn and come back, we are acting in a godly manner, because this is what God does. So, if you are in that situation and you have been hurt by especially children who have wandered from everything that you hold dear, be patient. Keep praying. Keep watching. When you do so, you are acting as God acts. You are acting in a godly manner. And you are growing closer to the Lord. And furthermore, you're not doing it alone. You know who's standing right there with you? Our Father in heaven. Because he's waiting for them as well. You're not doing it alone. So don't give up hope. Keep praying. There is a mystery that is at the intersection of human will and God's sovereignty that we don't understand. But keep praying. Continue to have hope. And remember that God is standing right there with you. And then here's our third takeaway, and it's the most important of all. We get so bent out of shape worrying about the fatted calf and the 1/3 of the estate. Let it go. It's not important. When you have Jesus, you have everything. Nothing else matters. Don't worry about the rest. You have Jesus. You have everything. Pray with me. Lord, as one prodigal standing in the midst of many others, I lift up this prayer to you, and I thank you for the forgiveness of sins. I thank you that you are the one that I can rely on, and I finally came to my senses and realized that. And I pray that prayer for everyone else who is here in the room. Dear Lord, for those who have never prayed that prayer yet, I pray, Lord, that aha moment will happen for them today, and they will turn to you and be changed, and be forgiven, and be healed. Dear Lord, I pray for those of us who are dealing with loved ones who have turned away from you, and in doing so have rejected everything that we've taught them, what we've raised them to know and to follow. Dear Lord, You know how that hurts. Help us with the pain, but help us not to grow fatigued. Help us not to be hopeless. Help us to keep praying, to keep watching, and to be in eager readiness to run out and embrace those who return to you. And dear Lord, help us to feel your presence standing with us. And dear Lord, I pray especially for all of us here that we would never forget, particularly as we get into the week and we deal with all the difficulties of life, that you are the true prize. And Lord Jesus, you have given yourself to us. We have everything. Help us, Lord, to continue to remember that. It is in your precious name that we pray. Amen.